All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to the Tennessee Holler. I am Justin Canoe with the Tennessee Holler. TNHoller.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook. Also, we have all of these other holler and all across the state. Thanks to your support, we really do appreciate it. From Memphis over through Knoxville, even to the Tri-Cities. That's your support that keeps us going. Your small dollar monthly donations make that happen. We also want to shout out Elisa Parker. If you're buying or selling a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through her. She's very supportive of us. And if you need a lawyer, Abby Rubenfeld is a rock star. If you're in Knoxville, use Chloe Akers. I should say.
I'm good.
Aside from Chloe Akers, if you're not in Knoxville, Abby Rubenfeld is where it's at. So today we're going to be talking about something that I think probably anybody, hang on, let me quiet this music here. I think anybody who's been paying attention to what's been going on knows that we have a super draconian abortion ban that is in place here in Tennessee as of not too long ago. It was triggered by the reversal of Roe versus Wade that sent the decision back to the states, and Republicans had passed a law in 2019 that basically prepared us for that moment to have one of the most draconian bans in the entire state. Now, we didn't realize how draconian it was until a lawyer at least I didn't. Gloria probably did. But until a lawyer in Knoxville started making these Instagram videos basically saying, hey, hello, people, wake up. There are no exceptions to this ban, not even for life of the mother. Exceptions is a legal term, and it's not in this law the way it is in some of the other bills throughout the country. There's only an affirmative defense, which means that the doctors get arrested and then they have to prove it. Basically, they're guilty until they're proven innocent in Tennessee. And she's been saying this for a long time. People started to pay attention. And then this week, there is a ProPublica article with, I think, The Lookout and maybe WPLN basically saying that, hey, they've known this all along. And not only that, but they don't want to fix it because they want to do this everywhere. And they want to basically tell their people, hey, stop saying you didn't know what was going on. We need to defend this law. So today we're going to talk to Representative Gloria Johnson, who was one of the only people who called this what it was when it happened, and Chloe Akers, who is the loudest voice as far as I can tell. And, you know, I do a lot of listening to this stuff about what this bill actually is. So hello to both of you.
Hi.
Hi there.
Okay, so first of all, I want people to know we can see your comment.
Justin froze.
I know. I guess it's just us, Gloria.
You're back now. Chloe, let me start with you. What were your thoughts when you saw this article come out saying we need to defend this law, and basically showing that they knew what it was all along, and that even people like Senator Briggs, backed it not knowing that it was actually going to become a law?
Sadly, my reaction, I think, if 6 months ago, it would have been shock. When I read it a couple of days ago, it was just, of course, was sort of my reaction that absolutely Tennessee Right to Life knew precisely what was in the language. They invited Will Brewer, their lead lobbyist, to testify on this bill, which he did. They had Paul Linton, who was more or less the architect of the legislation, went to the House Subcommittee on Health and was extremely clear about what the law was. He talked about the affirmative defense. He discussed the intentionality of the onus being on the doctor to prove by a preponderance the alleged necessity. To me, the fact that they were so honest about the law being what it is was, of course, they knew what it was. Now, what's really interesting, however, is publicly. Mr. Brewer, for example, has been interviewed by a number of news organizations I know, because they will interview me and then they will interview him. And it's really interesting how publicly his comments about the law are so so different from privately how he was discussing it on this, hour-long meeting. That publicly he has said, that the ectopic pregnancy is not considered a subject matter of this law. It only applies to elective abortions, quote unquote, his words, not mine. Did a huge article with Tennessee Lookout where he characterized the law very differently than he was describing it in this meeting. And so, of course they knew what it said. They were right. They had some of the most prolific anti-choice, anti-abortion lawyers in the country writing this legislation, and they knew what it was. And it is the harshest, most strict legislation on this issue in the country. Of the 12 states currently enforcing laws against abortion, there's only one that has no exception for life of the mother. It's Tennessee. Every other state, Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Dakota, I don't know if South Dakota is enforcing, they all have, Texas, they all have a mechanism within the legislation to decriminalize the medical procedure when it's necessary to save a patient. Some of them have other exceptions as well. Alabama excludes treatment of an ectopic and termination for lethal fetal anomaly from its definition. So I think if you're in the business of, generating laws that force pregnancy and you are anti-choice, the Tennessee law is, the Kentucky Derby winning racehorse, right? Like, it is the strictest law. Of course, they don't want to change it because changing it would, I think, maybe to them be perceived as giving an inch. It appears that they don't want to do that. So I guess I was not surprised at all that they were so candid privately about this intentionality. I am still, I would have to say, a little bit shocked about Dr. Briggs openly admitting that he just didn't read the legislation. That to me is, I do appreciate his honesty. I do always, as a voter, as a constituent, as just a human being. I think all too often politicians are afraid to admit when they're wrong and just say, I messed up. So I do appreciate that. But at the same time, that is absolutely no excuse. And I am disgusted that anyone, but let alone a doctor, a surgeon, grappling with legislation that would create such a seismic shift for maternal health and the women in the state of Tennessee couldn't be bothered to read a 2-page bill. I appreciate your honesty and your admission, but I don't think you're qualified to do your job if you can't read the legislation, particularly when it's 2 pages.
Well, I think you're right to call that out. It is rare for them to say, whoops, I was wrong. But it's shocking when it's something so serious and so has such an impact on so many people. Gloria, were you surprised that Senator Briggs admitted that he didn't read the bill? Or was that something that you sort of saw coming? And also, I guess I would say, since you are somebody who read the bill, does any of this shock you at all?
Well, it shocks me they got busted. And it makes me feel, it makes me feel vindicated because I knew this is what was happening. The problem is, how do you prove that? And yes, I knew Dr. Briggs didn't read the bill. I don't know if it was something he said to me or something else he said in the press that sort of indicated he didn't read the bill. He trusted his colleagues to tell him what the bill, that it had an exception. And so I have to go back to when this was happening. And there was the chatter around the legislature that there was an exception. I kept reading the bill and I didn't see it. And I'm not a lawyer, one of the members who's not a lawyer, but I could not see any exception. And this is sort of how Chloe and I got to know each other, because Chloe's reviewing the tapes and she sees me asking the question. So here's the thing, that they're sort of trying to give the impression that there's an exception. This bill has come through multiple committees and now it's on the House floor. And so I was going to ask the question about exception for rape and incest, but then I thought, no, I'm going to also include life of the mother because I don't see it in this bill. And so I asked the question, does this bill include an exception for rape, incest, or life of the mother? And Susan Lynn, her first answer was no, it does not. And that was the truthful answer. However, I went on to talk about what that would mean to women if there was no exception. And I saw her conferring with another member. And as soon as I stopped, she came back and said, oh, yes, there are protections for life of the mother. And initially, I bet you she was supposed to stop at protections because she didn't say exception. But she went on to say there are exceptions for life of the mother. She lied to every single citizen in the state of Tennessee, not just on that House floor. When you are speaking on the House floor, you are speaking to every citizen of this state. And she lied to every citizen of the state. Absolutely no ethical boundaries whatsoever.
Well, let's go ahead and watch that moment. How about? Because I have that queued up because we have the technology for that here at the Tennessee Holler. And I want to show you that moment so that you know what Gloria's talking about. And she really explained it perfectly because every single beat is exactly how she just said it.
For rape, incest, and life of the mother.
Chairman Lynn.
No, there's not.
Representative Johnson.
By the way, she says no, there's not. There's no exceptions, and you looked almost surprised.
Yeah.
At her honesty, because your follow up is almost as though she had said yes, there is. Right. Like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I was shocked that she admitted the truth.
Right. You were shocked. Yeah.
So what we're talking about, this legislation is going to give a violent rapist the right to choose the mother of his child, yet not allow a woman who's a victim of a violent rapist to determine whether or not she is going to carry that child to term?
Chairman Lynn.
Mr. Speaker, I was seeking recognition because actually this bill does protect the life of the mother. There was an exception for the life of the mother.
Right. So she said protect, and then she went right to exception. And you're saying that she probably wasn't supposed to do that second part.
If you watch Bill Lee, he always says protections.
Right.
He never says exception.
Correct.
So they know, they have been told by the lobbyists what to say. They are ruled and controlled by the lobbyists. They do not care about what Tennessee families want. They cater to lobbyists and billionaires. And this is a perfect example. We hear it on the phone call. We hear them being given talking points about how to talk about this. Mm-hmm. But the funniest part is these clowns were telling them that women will forget. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. No,
so, Chloe, we hear somebody lying when they push a law through. Now, I know you're a lawyer. I don't know if that makes you an expert on the legislative process, but it seems like it should be illegal to lie about a law as you're passing it. Is it?
I mean, I honestly couldn't say. I don't know enough legislative process. Lying in general is not a crime. Perjury is a crime, lying under oath. There's other criminal behavior, but I honestly don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think for me, Gloria is right. The whole way that Gloria and I got to know each other is we had never met. And I was trying to, just as a citizen, understand why everyone kept saying there were exceptions to this law. And, I've read it hundreds of times. I mean, I read that law hundreds of times, and I kept being like, Chloe, you're a lawyer. You've been a criminal lawyer for 14 years. There's no exceptions. Yet I would see in the media, I would see the New York Times, I would see everywhere saying exceptions. And it was when I went to the Tennessee General Assembly website, which I don't know if we could go there right now, but I'd be willing to bet you they still have the law characterized as one which creates exception to save the life of the mother, right? So I remember being like, am I just insane? Is there some secret bill that I don't know of? And so it was when I started to dive into the legislative history where I was like, why does everybody keep suggesting there's an exception when there's not? That I saw that clip that you just played for the first time in like early July. And I remember being like, who is this Gloria Johnson? And then I was like, oh yeah, Gloria Johnson's my state representative. So that's how we got to meet. And I think I came from like a really honest, genuine place of true curiosity. I didn't really follow politics on some super like deep level. I've been a public defender for 11 years. I've been fighting for social justice in the trenches every day. So the legislative process isn't something I always, I wasn't watching C-SPAN. I'm not watching like the Tennessee.gov hearings.
You're not missing much. I'm telling you. I
Right.
watch it too
Well,
much.
I mean, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, I just was trying to understand how a person could stand up in front of the entire house and say there was an exception for the life of the mother when like literally the word exception and mother is not in the bill. Like,
Well, that's for me, it was when I talked to Chloe, she really wanted to believe they made a mistake. And that's the same way all the doctors are, oh, this is a mistake and we have to fix it. I'm kind of like, y'all, I really don't think it was a mistake.
Yeah.
But we can go with that angle, but I just really don't think it's a mistake. And so because the general public and people who aren't super involved in politics want to think that the people working for them are being honest with them. I'm sorry, if I'm a woman out there in Tennessee, I would probably be looking at filing ethics complaints against some of these legislators who are lying to them.
Well, expand on that a little bit. What can people do right now to make their voices heard now that it has been revealed that they've been so blatantly lied to about a law that is so clearly putting women in danger?
I think they're going to let their representatives, their senators know this is not acceptable. They're not for this. And this is not going away. Women are organizing. We know this might be a long fight, but we are organizing. But as far as I can see, when you have a state representative standing up on the House floor and lying and lying to every Tennessean, and we know it's a lie now that we have heard these tapes and that we learn this more information, I believe that people should file ethics complaints against them.
Ethics complaints. And Chloe, do you think a lawsuit is possible here? What would it take to have standing? Is that something that somebody should look into? Would the ACLU potentially do that? I mean, it just seems like you can't possibly get away with lying about a bill so blatantly.
I think there's definitely, this is something that should be looked into. We have issues around sovereign immunity. We have issues around immunity that is granted for public officials. You have issues of free speech. You have issues of intentionality. There's so many legal issues involved in a potential lawsuit. I think one of the most rapid, direct responses to this situation, unfortunately, we just had the midterms, but we got another election coming up in 2 years. I've always said from the beginning, whatever your politics are, I don't know that people in Tennessee are we're not a group of people that suffer fools. And I don't think we're a group of people that want to have our taxpayer money paying the salaries of individuals who don't read the legislation that they're voting on. This is not like jaywalking, okay? We're talking about rapidly, and it was known as a trigger ban. We're talking about a bill that's designed to shift the entire scope of healthcare in 30 days, right? And you couldn't be bothered to read it. I think that to me is something that needs to be continued to be talked about all the way through to 2024. I think that the quickest way to fire these people from their job is to vote them out. And maybe you agree with the bill itself, but I don't know how you could vote for someone who has openly said they're just not doing their job. It'd be like me coming to court being like, sorry, we went to trial and lost. Truth be told, I didn't actually look at the evidence.
Right.
And especially as a physician who knows that this is going to damage women's health or possibly lose women or girls' lives.
Absolutely. And just to bring up, this is the very first sentence of that ProPublica article. It says, when State Senator Richard Briggs voted yes on Tennessee's total abortion ban, he never thought it would actually go into effect. His vote seemed like a political statement, not a decision that would soon impact people's lives. I mean, I'm a guy, and that infuriates me. I can't imagine what that must look like to women whose lives it impacts. And, it is having an impact. We're getting messages like this one from somebody who's just a holler follower who basically says the child they were carrying had severe defects at their ultrasound, no stomach, no kidneys, no legs. It was the hour the trigger ban went into effect. They had to find an out-of-state clinic. They ended up going to North Carolina and leaving his body behind as medical waste. Just a tragic, tragic story. and basically finding out that this is what they want for the entire country just infuriated her and forced her to reach out to us. Chloe, are you hearing stories like that? And what are you hearing from doctors who have no idea really what to do when women show up with their lives in danger?
Yeah, I mean, I have this unique perspective. I work a lot with doctors. So I'm really active doing webinars for ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And so I've talked to doctors all over the country. Tonight, I'm doing a webinar for doctors in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, here in Tennessee. And I think what people sometimes don't take into account is that when you make something a crime, people don't want to do it. Like, that's the point of making it a crime. And so when you criminalize healthcare, you put all of these physicians in a position where across the country in states that have trigger bans, these doctors are being forced to choose between their ethical obligation, their Hippocratic oath, their responsibility to their patient, and following a law that was enacted by, in the state of Tennessee, people who didn't even read it. And so the doctors that I'm communicating with are incredibly frustrated. They are fearful of their this impact on their practice, on their patients. What's astounded me so much is that these physicians are more concerned about the effect this will have on their patients than themselves. It's really, actually, if there's a silver lining of all of this, I've gotten a front row seat to the incredible and enduring resilience of these physicians that I've worked with. It's absolute. We are in a debt of gratitude to them. We come off COVID, they put their lives on the line for all of us. And then these physicians now have to go up against this. It is beyond. And so, yeah, they're terrified and they just want to be able to do their jobs and do their work. And what I also don't necessarily understand, if the legislature grappled with the reality that we're facing, which is, what do they think is going to happen to healthcare in Tennessee when these doctors say, you know what, nobody's forcing us to stay here. I'll go practice in a state where I can do my job without the fear of criminalization. And I think that that's also such a long-term consequence that someone like Dr. Briggs or Susan Lin or Dolores Gresham in the Senate or anyone who voted for this bill, which is every GOP lawmaker, didn't think through. Like, it's basic criminal principles. You make something a crime, people don't want to do it. Whether and to what extent you enforce it doesn't matter. You criminalize it, it causes hesitation. This situation is hesitation for healthcare, and the doctors are just going to leave eventually if it's not changed.
I think that's a great point. They keep saying no doctor's been arrested yet. We saw very clearly on that recording that they are going to start looking for them. They said they were. Susan Lin said she wants to, weed through these records and find out which ones are doing it more than others. Well, probably the ones that see more patients or see more pregnancies with issues. And we've already heard from those doctors that they are leaving the state. I know two that have left already.
Because it's not just about arresting them. It's also about the chilling effect. It's just like with education and the CRT law. It's that teachers now have to think twice about teaching the truth. It's that doctors now have to think twice about taking care of patients. And, your laws put them in that position. Nobody wants to be in that position. That's what Chloe's saying. So, yes, they're going to leave. They're not going to announce their exit. They're probably leaving right now. I mean, there's probably one on the road right now out of Tennessee. We're not going to hear about it. And just over time, our society will deteriorate. We already have bad health outcomes in so much of rural Tennessee. We already have high crime in so many of our cities. We already have a lot of poverty. So this is what's going on. And until people start blindly pulling the lever for politicians based on the letter next to their name, we're not going to see a change for this. Gloria, I want to ask you about one other part of this that I think is really important to highlight. And it was a part of the article, something that I know is heavy on the minds of a lot of women that are going through the pregnancy process in Tennessee, is the IVF and contraception conversation. Maybe your caucus gets to a point where you do want to talk about IVF. This is a quote from the audio, and how to regulate it in a more ethical way, quote unquote, ethical to them. Keep in mind the perspective here, or deal with some of those contraceptive issues. So this very clearly shows that IVF and contraception are on their minds. And, from a logic perspective, if you believe that life begins at conception, if you believe that life begins right when, sperm meets egg and no matter where it is. There are people who want to see IVF and the disposal of those embryos, I hope I'm using the right terminology here, criminalized. Because logically speaking, if life begins at conception, that should be murder also to you, right, Gloria? Is that right?
And that's why they don't want to have that conversation right now, because it just throws a big old clunker in their argument about life, and they don't care. And they're going to lie, and they don't want to talk about IVF because that shows the hole in their argument. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about contraception, and we are not going, thank goodness for this recording, because now every time they bring up one of those stupid talking points, we need to make sure that we point out they are saying what the lobbyists told them. They don't want to address IVF because it's a hole in their argument, and they will address IVF and they will address contraception when they think we've cooled off. Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's going to get hotter and hotter, and we will make sure it does. Women will make sure it does. And the people who care about women and girls are going to make sure it does. They don't want to have that conversation because it proves that their argument has holes and they don't know how to deal with it. So we need to bring it forward.
Yeah.
Chloe, what do you think when you hear that?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I agree with that reality that women are not going to forget about this. And I think that what the article really illustrated for me is that the far right and this movement to sort of strip women of their right to bodily autonomy, which has been successful. What I don't think they accounted for is that Roe was decided in 1972. This is 2022. Women in the course of the last 50 years have gained a hell of a lot more power, agency, economic control. We have taken back what was ours in the first place. We've spent the last 50 years doing that. So 1972, it is not. I don't think they accounted for the fact that when you strip pregnant patients of their rights to decide how to move forward with their pregnancy and their healthcare, when you criminalize their physicians, you are now doing so to a group of the population which 50 years ago didn't have the same level of power. We've got power now. We've got money. We've got agency. We've got women in the legislature. We've got women CEOs. We've got women running companies. We've got women doing so much more in society than we had the access to 50 years ago. And I think you're going to see a return. I don't think it's going to be a return to post-Roe. I think it's going to be something much more reflective of our human right to decide how we govern our body, our human right to access healthcare. No patient should ever be sitting at a hospital because they're having a ruptured ectopic and they are alone in a room by themselves, terrified of what's happening. The doctor's scared, they're scared. It's so draconian, it's so barbaric. It's not even, it goes so far beyond bodily autonomy. This is about human rights. This is about dignity. And I don't think that politicians took into account where women are in 2022. And it's not about them giving me my right back. I'm going to take what was rightfully mine in the first place. And that to me is where we're going. And I think the women of Tennessee and the people who care about women, and I think the trans community is deeply affected by the language in this bill. And I think we are watching an assault on so many different minority groups in this state. And we're done. We're not letting you give us something that we rightfully have, which is our human right to dignity and self-expression. And I just think it's going to be on. And I think that if they think that women are just going to forget about this, they're out of their minds.
And again, what I would like to ask women to do in Tennessee is to show up on Legislative Plaza that first day of session when we open up the second Tuesday in January and make their voices heard loud and clear. I want everybody to show up, all the groups that are being attacked by this extremist MAGA supermajority. But I think that women should be there in force. They did it after the no on one, the yes on one vote back in 14. More than 1,000 women showed up. I think we should see more than that on the second Tuesday in January. I don't have time to organize it, but I sure hope somebody does, because it needs to happen. We need a full agenda.
We'll pull this clip and make sure that people hear that Gloria Johnson's calling for a mass protest on day one. Before I let you guys go, I just want to end by pointing the finger at Governor Bill Lee and just show how he's been talking about this. This was a little while back when he tried to perpetuate the lie that this bill allows for exceptions.
The law provides for treatment of dangerous maternal health.
So careful
issues.
How he's saying it.
Doctor will make their best judgment for that danger to the mother, and that exists in the law now. Any changes that occur in the law, we'll see if there's conversation about that. Right now, I don't know of any. Our focus is on the implementation of the law this Thursday.
That's actually an affirmative defense. That's not an exception.
So that's me talking, and everything I'm saying there I got directly from Chloe Akers, so she gets full credit.
Melissa, one more question with
Are you aware of
Melissa.
that it's different? It's not an exception.
I would say
it's not a true exception under the law.
See, and he won't listen to me, so I had to get it translated by one of the other reporters because he doesn't hear anything I say. So when she says it, then he answers.
I've seen in other state bans. Do you think that there should be a true exception that would protect the doctor from being arrested and charged for performing an abortion to save?
I think that what we need to make sure is that there is an ability for a doctor to perform in the case of a dangerous maternal health situation. My sense and understanding from law is that does exist now.
All right, so there he is, basically saying that there's an exception without saying that there's an exception. Chloe, what do you think about how careful he's being right there to imply that there is an exception for the life of the mother without using, as Gloria pointed out, that word that Susan Lynn, who not the sharpest tool in the shed, used probably by mistake?
I mean, he crafted his response in a way that he didn't use the word exception. I actually saw that video pulled over in a parking lot and made a response video on my Instagram. I was angry. And part of what angered me was he said, we need a law that gives doctors the ability to treat these issues. And I said in my video, they have the ability. They've gone to medical school. The ability is within them. You don't need to give them that. They have that. What the law needs to do is decriminalize the procedure when in the doctor's medical judgment, it's necessary. And, he talks about danger to the mother. The affirmative defense has nothing to do with danger to the mother. And it's about a serious risk of substantial and irreversible impairment to a major bodily function or necessary to prevent death. So there's a big difference between something being necessary to prevent death and something being, necessary to prevent a danger, right? If you need a termination so you can receive chemo, radiation, and surgical intervention for a stage 3 triple negative breast cancer diagnosis you get at 10 weeks, if there was an exception and it did have a language in it that talked about preserving life or health, preserving the life or the health of the mother, then clearly if a mother needed to have the procedure to receive that treatment, it would fall within, right? But is it necessary to prevent death? I mean, that's such a incredible spectrum. And I think that this law just absolutely does not take into account the nuances of medical decision-making. And so what I think Governor Lee either doesn't understand or he does understand, and he's been coached on how to move around it, is medical decision-making is a lot like legal decision-making. Everything's done in degrees of risk. There's no perfect response. Everybody's different. Every situation is different. And we trust our physicians to make decisions in some of the most ethically complex scenarios possible. I think about transplants. Who gets the lungs? Who gets the heart? Who gets the liver? You think about end-of-life care. You think about a doctor telling a patient that they're dying and how the patient wants to live out their remaining lives. We trust these physicians not only to keep us alive and treat us when we're sick, but allow us to move through life with our own dignity intact when things aren't going well. And to take that away from them in this context that's so critical and so consequential, where people can die fast because these pregnancy complications, everything I've learned from these OBGYNs is this is the type of medical context where somebody can come into the ER looking okay. And within moments, it goes from okay to really bad. I mean, it's just the worst place to take away their decision making, to criminalize it. And so I think that it's so disingenuous. These doctors have the ability. We have some amazing physicians in Tennessee. They've gone to medical school. They've been licensed. They're board certified. Let them do their jobs, Governor. And, you know, I don't feel great about passing a law by a doctor who didn't even read it, who's now substituting their judgment for people who are trained and practiced. And so, you know, give them what they earned, which is the ability to do their job. I just think that it's just disingenuous, and it's so unfortunate. And, you know, I've got skin in this game. I'm a 40-year-old woman. I'm a lawyer. I'm a patient. I have an OBGYN. I don't want them to leave. I want them to be able to do their job. If I get pregnant, and I will definitely be at a high risk pregnancy because I'm 40, you know, I want to have the best physician treating me, treating my sister, treating my friends. I want that for everyone in Tennessee. And we're going to lose that if we don't change this.
Gloria, as a final thought here, you know, Jason Martin, when he was running for governor, used to point to what Governor Lee was saying there and basically say either he's lying or he didn't know what he signed. Either way, he's disqualified. Is that the sentiment that you agree with?
Well, absolutely. I also think it can be both, because I think that it showed how little understanding he had of the bill, and he was only relying on talking points that he was given. And that's such a sad thing that all of these people can act like, you know, they really didn't know, because all they do is listen to what they're told, either from leadership or from lobbyists. Mm-hmm. And we are taking the experts out of everything. Notice that they want to take physicians out of decision-making about health. They're taking teachers out of decision-making about education. These small government people want government to run every single aspect of your life. They are taking away our freedoms. They are making women second-class citizens and don't discuss that at all. But you cannot say that certain female members of our society don't have the rights, the human right to make decisions for their own bodies. And this is what they're doing. And we just have to be vigilant about calling it out every time. And we need to call them on their lies and their misinformation. And it's hard because there is so much. It's pretty much, for some of them, every time they open their mouth. But we've got to be there, and we've got to call it out, and we've got to find a way to reach those folks that aren't getting the facts. I want to take, for example, my mom, hardcore Republican, voted Republican 70 years of her life. And when I told her about the abortion ban, she's like, oh, Gloria, they'll fix that. They'll change that. I'm like, Mom, this is what, oh, no, they couldn't do that, Gloria. They'll fix that. I was like, Mom, they're not going to do it. I'm going to have to play her these tapes. But my mom, for the first time in 70 years, voted for Democratic governor and the Democrat running for state house in her district. And I think that we saw that a lot. And as we get the information out to every corner of the state, hopefully we'll see a lot more, because women matter, girls matter, and we need to make sure that we're protecting everyone in Tennessee. And this legislation does not protect women and girls, and it doesn't protect physicians so that they can practice what they're experts at.
Thank you both for calling it out, speaking the truth, doing what you do. Let's jump on here again down the line. Gloria, I know you're getting ready for a session that's sure to be as nutty as ever, probably worse. So definitely keep us informed of what's going on up there. And Chloe, thanks for what you do.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
So that's Chloe and Rep. Gloria Johnson, who I'm sure you're following if you're following us, two really important voices, especially on this topic. And, you know, it's really amazing the lies behind what happened here. You know, the ProPublica Lookout WPLN article, again, says that Senator Briggs said that he didn't think it would go into effect when he supported it. Just insane. Voted yes, didn't think it would go into effect. And then you've got the people behind the law saying the way many state laws work, they'll say elective abortion is illegal. You did. Elective abortion is illegal all the time. So just like Chloe was saying, it is the most draconian law in the country. And then Reardon, who she was talking about, one of the guys, says, I encourage you to hide behind the skirts of women who've actually been there, which is a really classy way of putting it. And it really helps to listen to these guys basically say, don't back down. So this no exceptions abortion ban, they don't want them to fix it. That's the important point. They don't want them to fix it, because if they fix it, then they're backing down and it shows weakness.
Please don't say things like we only passed this law because we never thought that Roe was going to be overturned. Yes, we did think that Roe was going to be overturned.
So he's basically talking to Briggs saying, don't say things like we never thought this would be overturned, so we passed this law basically to show how we felt. No, we did think it was going to be overturned. Like stop backing down is what he's saying.
That's why we passed this law, to put our state in a strong position. And we need to defend this law and not at every attack of affirmative defense was negligently put in there, or there's no exception for rape and incest, or whatever the accusation may be. This law is carefully thought out and carefully drafted by the foremost scholars around the country on this issue, and it was flawlessly executed in the legislature by you all over.
So it was carefully crafted by the foremost scholars and flawlessly executed by you all. So this guy is saying there were no mistakes behind this bill. There's no exceptions ban, no mistakes, intentional. No exceptions for life of the mother, intentionally. And Republicans knew it and lied about it. And Susan Lynn told the truth for a full minute on the House floor and then lied about it because she knew how that sounded. No exceptions for life of the mother. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And that's the law here. And women are suffering because of it. And Governor Lee is lying about it still, saying that there are exceptions. There are not. And there you have the lobbyists behind the bill. And these legislators listen to lobbyists regularly, telling them, don't back down. This was on purpose. Don't fix it. Keep criminalizing doctors, putting them in a position where they feel like they can't give women the care that they need, which will lead to messages like the ones we've been getting from women who have been in horrible situations. Women that wanted to have children, not women who are like using it as contraception as is the boogeyman that you throw out there all the time. No, these women wanted to have these children, but the babies have defects or the pregnancy is ectopic, and they need to be able to treat these women. It's going to be your mother, your wife, your daughter. And as Chloe is saying, these doctors are going to leave and probably already are until we wake up in this state, stop pulling the lever blindly for anybody who has an R next to their name just because the R is there. For what? Like, if you're a Republican watching this, I would like for you to come on here and tell me, what is so great about that R? What is it about Democrats that scare you so much? I'd love to have a real conversation about that, because I can almost guarantee you that most of what you think is simply not true. And I hope one day that we get to a place where we're actually voting for people based on the merits of who they are rather than the letter next to their name. That's my hope for our state. Speaking of that, just on a final note here, the insurrectionist in chief just announced his candidacy for office, which is just crazy to me. And I would love to know how strict constitutionalists can justify letting a guy who basically started an insurrection run for office when in the Constitution, Amendment 14, Section 3, it says if you've engaged in insurrection, you can't run. So if you want to make the case to me that this guy didn't engage in insurrection, you can try. But to me, all that says is you didn't watch those hearings, because he very clearly did. And then the other thing that I think we're not talking about enough is his daughter's husband getting $2 billion from the Saudis right after they left office, months after they left office. So they're going to go after Hunter Biden, but they don't want to talk about this. $2 billion. Even the worst version of what they're talking about regarding Hunter Biden pales in comparison to $2 billion to Kushner, Ivanka's husband, right after they left office. And they don't want to mention that at all. And that isn't even debatable. That happened. And now Ivanka's like, yeah, I'm not going to be involved this time around. Well, of course not. You got your $2 billion. What do you need to get back in there for? You're good. And will they just go along and support this guy anyway? Well, we don't know, because some of them are just kind of waiting to see which way the wind blows, like Bloggerty, which is our fun new name for Blackburn and Haggerty. They wouldn't tell WQRN if they're supporting Trump. So they might bail on him. Jason Zachary bailed on him. Ivanka bailed on him. Fox News is bailing on him. This is how the New York Post talked about him. Been there, done that, on page 26 with a little Florida man makes announcement at the bottom of the cover without a picture of him when he announced. So people are trying to bail on him. Fox didn't even have him as one of their potential 2024 candidates. But what I have to say to them is good luck with that. This is still Trump's party, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not. And you're not moving on from him until he lets you. It's not really a political party. It's a very cultish situation going on there. And anybody who thinks that you're just going to move on from him casually, you got another thing coming. Just as a final thing, I thought this 7 seconds really summed up the way that the Republicans are going to run the House for the next 2 years better than anything else could. This is today, a few minutes ago, Republicans making it very clear what the next 2 years will be about.
If we can keep it about Hunter Biden, this is kind of a big deal, we think. If we can keep it about Hunter Biden, that would be great. Yeah.
If we could keep it about Hunter Biden, that would be great. That's what's coming for 2 years. Let's keep it about Hunter Biden is what they're going to do. They don't care about inflation. They don't care about your problems. They just want to try to weaken Biden for the next 2 years by, I guess, focusing on his son and completely ignoring the fact that Trump's son openly got $2 billion from the Saudis months after leaving office. How do you justify, like, change my mind that that's not crazy? Change my mind that ignoring Jared's $2 billion payout from the Saudis to focus on Hunter Biden is not wildly hypocritical. Change my mind. I dare you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.